Welcome to the Dr. Francavilla Show. I'm your host, Dr. Carolyn Francavilla, board-certified family physician and diplomate with the American Board of Obesity Medicine. I've been helping patients lose weight to treat and prevent medical problems for the last 10 years, and I'm taking what I've learned from them to you. In this podcast, you will learn the science behind why you struggle with your weight and what to do about it, tips for common challenges, work to fight bias about what a healthy weight really is, and improve your relationship with food and your body. Please remember that while I'm a doctor, I'm not your doctor. This podcast is meant to be informational in nature only, not medical advice. Please seek out care from your physician for your specific needs. Okay, let's get started. Hello, and welcome back to this week's episode. This week, I have a really exciting guest with us, Dr. Becky Andrick. And Dr. Becky Andrick was my mentor. She got me into the field of obesity medicine. If you listened to my first podcast episode, how I talked about getting interested in this, she's the doctor I was talking about. So I'm so excited to have her on this episode. Dr. Andrick has been practicing medicine for 28 years. Her residency training was in family medicine, and she worked as a family medicine and urgent care physician for many years. She's always been very focused on preventive medicine, and with the rising rates of childhood obesity, she developed a passion to learn and teach nutrition. She was certified as a nutrition specialist by the American College of Nutrition in 2008 and specializes in weight management and other nutrition-related medical problems. She's also the chair of our Obesity Medicine Advocacy Committee. She's married with 2 daughters, enjoys hiking, playing piano, and travel. So welcome, Dr. Andrick. Thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, well, thank you for having me, Carolyn.
So tell me, how did you actually get started in all of this? How did you get involved in the field of obesity medicine and helping people lose weight?
You know, like you mentioned, I was doing urgent care when my kids were little, kind of working part-time, and I got interested in the pediatric obesity epidemic, and I started a little business called Kids Dish and Nutrition, where I taught nutrition classes to kids through cooking. And then I would kind of distill the nutrition information down for the kids, and the adults would be watching and they'd be like, "Do you do this for adults?" You know, I was like, "No, but I could." So I started seeing patients one-on-one, and it kind of just built from there.
That's awesome. I actually hadn't heard that story. So that's new information to me. So very cool. Yeah. We think about, teaching kids these skills, and we kind of forget that like our adults may never have learned some of the healthy eating or how to balance their plate or some of the skills, because like, who teaches you that stuff?
Right. Yeah. So I got obesity medicine certified in 2012. I kind of started doing weight management stuff about 2008 and got certified a little later, but I started my own practice called Weight Wellness Denver in 2010 and just have been going since then.
Yeah. I think you've been a huge leader in our field and taught lots of people how to help others. So one of the things we wanted to talk about today was why it's so hard to maintain weight loss. So, it's actually not, it's hard to lose weight, but there's lots of different ways people can lose weight. Most people have lost at least a little bit of weight trying at some point in their life, but most people's experience is that maintaining that weight is really hard. I know, and I'm sure you'll have similar experience. When I have a new patient come into clinic, I ask their story, what's happened with their weight over time. And most of my patients have lost weight, often over and over and over again in their life. And so what really becomes a challenge is maintaining weight. Like, how do you maintain that weight loss? So tell me how you explain to patients why it is so hard to maintain a weight loss.
Well, from an evolutionary standpoint, our bodies are hardwired not to starve, right? The body really likes energy in equaling energy out. It's a homeostatic mechanism, and the body very tightly regulates energy intake and energy output. And when you are losing weight, you are releasing stored energy from your fat cells. And so the body senses this and says, wait a minute, I think I'm starving. And so I'm going to turn up your hunger signaling and slow your metabolism to make you put that weight back on.
Perfect. I explain it that way, probably because I learned it from you. But yeah, it's exactly that, right? Our bodies really are fighting against all of this. So people will get frustrated because they feel like I'm doing the same thing I was doing 2 months ago that was working. All of a sudden, it's not working anymore. And it's because your body's really trying to achieve that homeostasis, right? It's trying to get back into balance. It doesn't want you to lose weight. So it's slowing down metabolic rate, it's increasing hunger, decreasing fullness, and now you feel like it's really hard to maintain that weight.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. There's been some interesting studies about the decrease in energy expenditure after weight loss. One was a study on the Biggest Loser participants. With all the participants, they measured their resting energy expenditure before the show, after the show, and then in this study, they did it 6 years later. And the majority of the participants 6 years later had really put on a fair amount of their weight back, but their resting energy expenditure still stayed down. So there's some question about, people talk about yo-yo dieting, right? Like when you diet and your energy expenditure goes down, does it actually come all the way back up again? There have been other studies on bariatric surgery patients who have lost a lot of weight, but they have found that their energy expenditure goes down maybe like at 6 months, but then by a year or 2 years, it kind of levels back out. So it's still, the question is out there, right? Does the energy expenditure go down and stay down, or does it go down and kind of gradually come back up?
What I remember when I looked at that Biggest Loser data was it was different for different people. Some people's metabolic rate had really decreased and not rebounded, but there were some people where their metabolic rate had gone back to where it should be, to normal. So there's definitely some variation from person to
Yeah.
person too, right? Just
Mm-hmm.
like everything
Yeah.
we do in medicine. But on average, we can expect in most of these studies that weight loss outside of surgery, it looks like most people's metabolic rate goes down when they've lost weight.
Yeah, it definitely does. It's your body's way again of responding to a decrease in energy, right? And wanting to have those energy stores back in your fat cells. So yes, the body works against you after weight loss,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Yeah. But, and I think that can be really frustrating to hear for people. The way I try to frame that to people is that there's an explanation now, right? Like, yeah,
Right.
it's frustrating. I agree. And hopefully now it's not your fault. You're not just doing things wrong. Your body's really just working against you.
Yeah, I hear that from patients all the time, right? It's so frustrating. And they feel bad and they say, well, I still don't feel like I'm eating very much. And I'm, you know, kind of still doing this and doing that. But, your weight just continues to kind of gradually creep back up. And you feel like you can't take your eye off the ball ever,
Yeah,
or here it
that is
comes.
such a great point, that feeling like you can't take your eye off the ball. And I think it's kind of true, right? The phrase I'll often say is anything you do to lose weight, you have to keep doing to keep it off. So, if you did this really aggressive diet to lose the weight, well, you do have to keep that ball in the air, right? You have
Right.
to keep doing that. So one of the things I try to guide my patients is like picking things that will be sustainable for them, because you could do that crash 30-day diet and you'll lose weight. But in 30 days, are you going to really be able to continue with that really aggressive way of eating?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I try to work with patients on a more kind of nutrient dense, kind of lower calorie Mediterranean-ish diet, right? Like something that can be sustainable,
Like a
something
flexible way of
simple.
eating. And I've been talking recently, both on my show and with patients, about just eating more real food. I think there's a lot more
Right.
information coming out that the ultra processed food is the stuff that it's really easy to overeat. We absorb all the nutrients from it. And one of the things we see when we look at healthy patterns of eating is most of them include lots of whole foods. They include lots of vegetables. They include lots of foods with fiber, which is more or
Mhm.
less a description of the Mediterranean diet.
Right. That's right.
Okay, so let's talk about some of the hormones that are involved in this process. And I feel like people love to use the word hormones right now. Is it my hormones? And I always kind of jokingly like, yeah, but probably not the ones you're thinking of, right? So what are the hormones that are involved in this process that makes it so hard to maintain weight?
Well, we have two sort of main hormones that are involved in energy intake versus energy output. And one is called ghrelin, which is a hormone that makes you feel hungry. And it's mostly manufactured in the stomach and gets released when you're hungry. I call it ghrelin so that you can remember it. But when you have lost weight and your brain is going, okay, we don't want to starve, let's turn up the ghrelin signaling, then that, is what happens after weight loss. People think like, oh, well, people with obesity must just have a lot of extra ghrelin. But when you look at research studies, they actually show that people who have obesity have a lower ghrelin level than people who are lean. However, it's theorized that people with obesity might have a little more sensitivity to ghrelin. And also sometimes, after you eat a meal, your ghrelin levels are high, you're hungry, you eat your meal, and those ghrelin levels fall off quickly to let you know you're not hungry anymore. And that sometimes for patients with obesity, they don't fall off quite as sharply, which might lead to delayed feeling of satiation or fullness and potentially eating again sooner than you might need. But anyway, I feel like some of my patients will be like, I lost this weight, and especially if they're on anti-obesity medication, and if they come off their medication, they'll say like, I feel like I'm hungry all the time. But then there are other people that they don't notice it that much. But even if you're taking 5 or 10 bites more per meal, like that adds up over time, right? So it can be kind of subtle, and the weight loss or weight recurrence can be slow, but sometimes it's not obvious.
So the flip side of that is the sort of more fullness side of things, right?
Right. So that one of the big drivers of that is called leptin. And leptin is a hormone that is actually secreted by your adipose tissue, by your fat cells. So it's sort of a gauge for the brain to decide how much energy reserves do we have. And so leptin, when it is circulating, it sends a signal to your brain saying, I am full, I'm satiated, we don't need to eat anymore. And it also will increase your energy expenditure. But what happens after weight loss, when you have decreased adipose tissue, right? Your fat cells have shrunk, then we have less leptin being produced. The brain says, I think I'm starving. And so you will eat more.
Yeah. And one of the things that has become interesting to me over the last few years is most our previous medications and even our discussions often talked about hunger. Like the problem with people who struggled with their weight was all that they were hungrier. But our newer medications, our injectable medications seem to work more on making people feel full. People will describe eating a few bites of something and feeling full. And I think that we're going to find that that feeling of fullness is a lot more important in this process than the hunger side of things, because we've been trying to decrease hunger for a long time with okay results. And some people really are a lot hungrier, but it seems that a lot more universally that not feeling full and that eating a few extra bites because your stomach hasn't told you you're done seems to be more of the reason why people struggle than the hunger, is what I'm starting to see.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. Yeah. There are a multitude of hormones that also signal the brain for satiety, right? For stopping eating. GLP-1 is a big one that we know from the gastrointestinal tract. Those new injectable medicines you talked about kind of are GLP-1 receptor agonists. There's another one called PYY. Like all of these hormones also can potentially be being altered after weight loss.
And then if you think about both sides of it too, if you're someone who's hungrier and less full, that's like an even worse combination, right? If you're kind of hungry, but you feel full, that's okay. If you're not that hungry, but you feel full easily, like that's okay. But if you have both of those things going on, like that's a difficult combination to
Right.
regulate.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I think sometimes it's not just that feeling of hunger, it's that feeling of, but I want something high fat or high carb, or I want sugar or salt, some of the cravings and kind of reward, reasons that we eat start to also come into play.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, I have an episode, I don't know which one it was, where I talk about all the different sort of things that make us eat. Like, what is appetite, right? Like, from fullness, satiety, satiation, cravings, hunger, like what are all these different things that affect our appetite? And sometimes identifying those for yourself or helping a patient identify those is really powerful, because then you figure out
Yeah.
what's making you eat, right? Like, oh, I just
Right.
never feel full. Well, that's a hard problem to solve, right? You might need a
Yeah.
medication, or man, I just really haven't figured out how to deal with my emotions. I just eat when I feel something. Well, that might be something that you don't need a medicine for. Therapy or stress reduction may solve that problem.
Right.
So, one of the things, I was reading a blog that you had written about this topic, and you talked about something that I hadn't thought about in a little while, which was the effect that sleep has on both leptin and ghrelin. Can you tell me a little bit more about how sleep affects leptin and ghrelin?
Yeah. Well, I think it's been known for some time that short sleep duration is associated with obesity. And there have been some studies looking into it a little bit more, like why is that happening? But sometimes with sleep deprivation for as short as a couple of nights, we can see ghrelin levels going up and leptin levels going down. And so people are increasing their intake. There was one study they did last year on sleep extension where they took a group of people, were monitoring their calorie intake while they were sleeping about 6.5 hours a night. And for 2 weeks, they had them sleep for 8.5 hours a night. And they saw their calorie intake go down by about 270 calories per day.
Wow.
Yeah, so it can be significant.
So, if you're someone who has been trying to figure out why you're struggling, one of the things could be that you're not getting enough sleep.
Not getting enough sleep. I know it sounds pretty basic, but most of my patients are not getting enough sleep.
I think that's like half of America, maybe more, right?
I know.
Or the quality of sleep too. So there could be a
Yes.
health reason, menopausal hot flashes, or sleep apnea, or a joint pain, or something that's interfering with sleep. It may not be that you're not making enough time too.
Yeah. Yeah. I've gotten fairly liberal with the sleep specialty consultation
Yeah.
referrals, because I feel like it's so important.
Well, that I have a guest coming up soon about sleep, and she's a sleep specialist. So I'm going to
Oh,
get into
great.
that. I'll have to let you know so you can check out
Yeah.
the episode.
Yeah.
So, when you're helping your patients figure out long term how to maintain weight, knowing this information, the importance of sleep, the importance of these hormones, knowing that it is physiologically going to be hard to maintain weight, what are some of the key pieces of advice that you tell your patients on how to maintain their weight loss?
Yeah. Well, as patients are going through their sort of weight loss phase, I try to get people to really start thinking about what kind of physical activity do I enjoy? When is it going to fit into my schedule? How can I start making that a little bit more a part of my daily routine? And the reality is that, exercise doesn't help us that much with weight loss. Like it does help, but where it's crucial is with weight maintenance. So my hope is that by the time we get to a place where the patient has lost weight, is feeling really good and wanting to maintain that, I'm hopeful that their exercise level is fairly high.
So I'm
Um,
going to stop you because I want to go back to the Biggest Loser information you provided.
yeah,
I've seen that Biggest Loser information about the metabolic rate. There was new data that I hadn't seen until a conference we went to this past year about the difference in who maintained from the Biggest Loser competition. And so they looked at people who had, kept off more than 12% weight, I think, and those who hadn't. And they looked at how much food they were eating, how much calories they were intaking, and there actually wasn't a big difference. But when they looked at the volume of exercise that the contestants who had kept the weight off were doing, that was clearly the biggest thing that was the difference in the people who had kept more weight off is they were exercising like an hour a day. So I
yeah,
thought that was really, powerful information that in the beginning, what you eat makes a huge difference, but long term, the exercise is
yes,
probably one of the deciding factors of if you'll be able to maintain your weight loss.
right. Well, there's a long ongoing study that was started like in 1995 called the National Weight Registry. And they have had people register on this website if you've lost 30 pounds or more, if you've been able to keep it off for a year. They try to evaluate like what are these people's habits, right? And allowing them to be successful with their weight maintenance. And the biggest one is the physical activity. And they have tried to come up with, well, how much is enough physical activity? And from this study, it's about 300 minutes of planned physical activity a week. So that's about 60 minutes, 5 days a week. But you can split it out however you want, right? But most of those people in that study are walking. So, like, it doesn't have to be a vigorous run every day, and my hope with patients is that we're doing some kind of combination of cardiovascular exercise and also some strength training.
Yes. Yes. So I think I agree so much that that's the same advice I give, that long term exercise is so key, and shoot for like close to an hour most days of the week, but you can split that up, throughout the day. You can do 4 15-minute walks. So you can just take a
Right.
walk during your breaks at work or walk your dog a few times a day. And like that counts.
Totally. Yeah. No, I'm with you. The exercise really helps to mitigate that drop in your resting energy expenditure by helping you to increase your energy expenditure just total through the day.
So exercise, what other things do you, recommend to your patients to help with that maintaining of weight?
Well, I think you brought up a key point earlier about whatever your dietary pattern looked like while you were losing weight, like it needs to be something that you can adhere to, right? I heard a great lecturer give talk on like what's the best diet, is it the Atkins diet or the zone diet or the paleo diet, right? And at the end of the talk, when she presented a lot of evidence, but basically the answer was whatever diet you can stick to is the best one. So whatever you have been doing, you gotta kind of keep doing it. So that's a big one.
Yes, absolutely. So continuing the same patterns. And I think that's where it gets tough when you start a nutrition plan that's working, it's really rewarding. You see the scale change, every week or every month. And then when you're maintaining, you still have to keep doing that, but you don't get some of that same feedback or reward that the scale is changing or you're having to
That's
buy
right.
new clothes. Now you just keep doing the same thing just to maintain where you are. And I think that can get like a little emotionally draining sometimes for people.
Yeah, I do. I think so. One of the tools that has been sort of shown over and over again to help people with weight loss, well, two of these tools that I think about. One is self-monitoring, which is sort of getting on the scale on a, regular basis and, doing some food journaling or keeping a diet diary, but also getting support, right? So the self-monitoring and support, I think that that's the main reasons that Weight Watchers works for people because they get both. And I know, people get tired of food journaling, right? It becomes a little tedious, but I do find that some of my patients who are more successful with their weight maintenance are still doing their food journal,
Yeah. Yeah, no, I've had a few people who have been really successful with food journaling and they're not on a medication and they kind of get sick of the food journaling. And I try to reframe it as, but all you have to do is journal, right? Like you're not getting surgery, you're not getting a medication, we're not doing anything crazy. All you're doing is writing down what you're eating. And if you can reframe it that way, you're like, all right, well, maybe that's not so bad. Like I just have to write down what I'm eating and I might be able to keep losing weight. Like, okay, I could do that.
Right. Well, the apps you can use on the phone to make it pretty easy, Lose It or MyFitnessPal, those kinds of apps also are pretty helpful.
Yeah, yeah. A lot of them now you just scan things, it does all the math for you, you can save things. So, yes, food logging is a lot easier than it was 15 or 20 years ago.
Yeah, for sure. So the other thing is the support, right? I think however you were getting support through your weight loss journey, whether you had a physician helping you, a PA nurse practitioner, your primary care doctor, a trainer, a workout buddy, a support group like Weight Watchers, continuing to touch base with your support to help serve as a check-in and a way to help stay on track, I think is also really important. I have a lot of patients who lose their weight and I won't see them for a while and they come back and they've had some weight recurrence. And there's lots of reasons that people sort of stop coming for a while, right? Like we can have a family member that's ill or they lost their job and just a lot of stress or whatever it is. But I think my patients who are successful with weight maintenance are the ones that keep coming, the ones that
Yes,
I
yes.
see regularly. I ask them, let me see you in 3 months. Let me see you in 3 months. And the ones that continue to come and they're still paying attention are the ones that are probably the more successful
Yeah.
people.
Going back to what you said earlier, you always kind of have to keep your eye on the ball, right? Unfortunately, it isn't something that just gets easier. And so picking things that are sustainable, picking options that'll work long time, and then realizing like whatever you're doing, it has to be something you're able to keep doing. And yeah, I tell people when they meet me, we're going to see each other monthly for a while and then we'll space it out. But like pretty much you're stuck with me forever. Like if I'm one of the tools that helps you, like you're stuck with me.
Absolutely. No. And I love my long-term patients, you know?
Yeah.
It's a wonderful part of doing obesity medicine. You get to have long, sustained relationships.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Well, if people want to find you, want to connect with you, how can they find you? How can they find your clinic or how can they find you other places?
My practice is called Way to Wellness Denver, and you can just Google Way to Wellness
Way to
Denver,
Wellness Denver.
and we will pop up. You can check out our website, and all of our information is on there. So,
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me. Super cool to have you on tonight. And until next week, take care. Thank you for listening to the Dr. Francavilla Show, where we learn about all things related to weight and health. If you love this podcast, make sure to leave those 5-star reviews and share this podcast with a friend or loved one. If you have a topic about weight and health you want me to tackle, head over to the website, thedrfrancavillashow.com to submit your question. And make sure to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss next week's episode. Take care.